Welcome to Keys to the Future. I'm your host, Gabby Coe. I've enjoyed a successful engineering career and want to inspire you to remain focused on your STEM education and career. Join me as I chat with amazing guests who are shaping the future and sharing their journeys to inspire yours. Ready to unlock your potential? Let's dive in. I am so excited to introduce our guests, two emerging professionals. Theresa Bitetto is a New York native who relocated to Virginia during the COVID-19 pandemic to pursue new career opportunities. Initially focused on medical devices, she pivoted to satellite manufacturing through networking, launching a successful aerospace career. Over 4 years, Theresa has excelled in hardware manufacturing, refining her leadership and communication skills. She earned a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Tufts University and is now pursuing a Master's in Space Systems Engineering at Johns Hopkins University. Passionate about satellite systems, Theresa embraces challenges and remains open to new career opportunities. Rachel Kelly is originally from Maryland and now resides in Virginia, where she moved to pursue career opportunities while staying close to home. A 2020 UMBC graduate in mechanical engineering, she started her career during the COVID-19 pandemic, developing resilience in a remote work environment. Rachel began as a payload mechanical engineer and transitioned to a structures engineer, supporting production for a commercial space program. She also serves as a cost account manager. Currently, she is pursuing a master's in space systems engineering at Johns Hopkins University, and she aims to become a lead subsystems engineer, eventually transitioning into management. Welcome, ladies, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with the Keys to the Future community.
Thank you so much, Gabby.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
So today we're talking to Theresa and Rachel as they are reflecting on their journey so far, the lessons they've learned, the obstacles they've overcome, and the unexpected moments that have shaped their career path so far. So speaking of where you are today, every journey has its twists and turns. Can you both share a bit about your journey and what led you to your current role? Theresa, would you like to start?
I think I've always generally been curious about the world around me and how things work. I've had the blessing of some really good career-oriented parents who acted as mentors for me. So my dad actually studied mechanical engineering himself. So he kind of helped me figure that out, that I wanted to try something like mechanical engineering. And eventually I just figured it's a good degree to have. It kind of broadens your application pool when it comes to finding a job. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. As you stated, started with medical devices, but then kind of by chance ended up in the space industry, which is really cool, really exciting. So generally, I just think that my natural curiosity pointed me toward engineering and trying to understand how things work.
And how about you, Rachel?
I can also relate that engineering runs in my family as well. So my dad got his undergrad mechanical engineering and my grandfather got his undergrad in physics, but he is now a thermal engineer and I work at the same company as him as well right now. So it was a pretty easy choice to determine what I wanted to do because I really look up to him. And in high school, I thought, okay, I like math, I like physics. My family is telling me that engineering is a great choice, so I decided to pursue that in college and I just stuck with it. And that's what I've been doing today.
That is awesome because you both seem to have STEM in your DNA. That is great. And Theresa, you mentioned, you went from medical devices to satellite. That's kind of like a 180, right? So how did
Yeah,
you do that?
it was kind of just by chance a little bit. I think it mostly was trying to find a job. I wanted medical device, but I couldn't find anything. Graduating into COVID was really hard. There weren't many opportunities available. And so I actually just kind of randomly ended up in satellite manufacturing. Again, super lucky because it's a cool industry because mechanical engineering can lead you to like HVAC. It didn't have to be as cool as space, but opportunity was there. So I think that that's why the transition came about.
Excellent. And it seems like you both follow the opportunity. I applaud you because both of you started your careers during the COVID pandemic. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine being remote and just trying to meet people that will kind of show you the ropes and show you those first few months of getting into a new job, old in the industry and so on. So my hats off to you both. And so I'm talking, making that leap from school to the professional world can be daunting, especially during the pandemic. But what was the most challenging part of that transition from school into the professional world? Rachel, any thoughts?
So I thought the transition was luckily not too bad because I am familiar with doing school from home. So it was just then transitioning into work from home. So my schedule was relatively similar and it was nice to be able to be around my family members, and it was kind of fun being able to listen into some of my grandpa's meetings when he was working from home, and just having that family bonding time. But career-wise, it was a little bit challenging to get my questions answered and just kind of know what was generally going on at first. Work is, of course, very different from school. And so it does help to have a bunch of people around to ask questions to. But when you're at home, you have Teams to chat with people and phone calls, and it's not quite the same. And then mechanical engineering is also a very hardware oriented kind of job. It helps to physically see what you're working on. And CAD is useful, of course, but when you actually see things in person, you realize, wow, that's not exactly what it looks like in CAD as what I'm used to. So that's definitely challenging, having everything virtual and limited access to support.
I had a very opposite experience. I moved from New York. I went from being around family to not knowing anybody, not, complete transplant to a new area. And on top of that, my work was in person. So, satellite manufacturing can't happen remotely. So I know that a lot of people like had government orders to keep working, and I was one of those people. I had to work in person. I did meet everybody behind a mask, which was very peculiar, but, I think in terms of transition from school to career, I think the hard part for me was going from an environment where I was with people my own age and people who are really like-minded to then now working with people who were really different from me, kind of diverse age groups, diverse backgrounds. And then I went from, being with people my age to being with mostly men who were twice my age and who had like technical experience. So it was hard and challenging to adjust to that. I think that in terms of skills, it helped me build really good communication skills, and I got to try to feel that situation out. But it definitely took a ton of time to figure out how to communicate with just different groups of people.
Absolutely. Definitely really trying times and challenging times all around. So not just to come into a brand new industry when you thought you were going to go into a different industry altogether, and then coming into an environment where masks prevented us from communicating probably more effectively and not getting to know everybody as you would otherwise because we're limited within that space and that environment. So again, I'm very impressed how you both have handled that transition. So reflecting on those early days, is there something that you wish you had known when you first started your career?
I think for me personally, I would have liked to have known about tuition reimbursement and or tuition help. So a lot of people, I think in engineering specifically, are kind of play this game of, do I graduate or do I do an extra year and leave with my master's degree? And I know, especially with COVID, people were flocking to finishing their master's because they didn't want to enter the workforce in such a strange time. And so, um, what I wish I'd known is that a lot of big companies or a lot of companies in general will offer tuition assistance. And so you can actually get your master's degree or higher education in general through your company. They will help you pay for it. With caveat to that, they won't pay for maybe all of it. And sometimes you owe the company some time after you finish, but it's there as a tool to help people kind of further their career in higher education.
Yeah, adding on to that, I've also noticed that there are a lot of other employees that take advantage of this same system. So if you have any questions going into making this decision on if you want to pursue higher education or not, it's really important to reach out to your manager and they can connect you with people who have probably done the same program that you're interested in already. And they can also give you tips on which classes they enjoyed or recommendations and just general guidance.
Absolutely. I also made use of that benefit that employees offer, right, to pay for your higher education. But let's not talk about when I did that. It's been a little while. So that brings me to a big question. What's one early career lesson that has stuck with you throughout your journey?
I would say that mentoring is incredibly important. If anything, it's almost like a second job sometimes to just make sure that you're getting yourself out there, putting yourself out of your comfort zone and introducing yourself to people who could become really beneficial contacts throughout your career. And I've also noticed that when you talk to someone first, it's good to get another connection through that person by the end of the conversation to build and build and build. And so that way networking never stops. It's something that you continue throughout your career, but it's also really important to do that at the very beginning because it builds a foundation for you to start with.
Yeah, that I would fully agree. I also think one tip I wish I kind of had was not to be afraid to talk to your manager. I definitely had the perception that my manager was too busy for me and that I couldn't access them or I was an annoyance, but it's part of their job. And the more transparency you have with your manager, usually the better because they can act as somebody who's a mentor or they can help you network and figure out what you want as well. So I think that kind of on that same vein that Rachel mentioned, it not only helps you network, but also gives them visibility into the work that you do and can help you either refine kind of the skills that you want to refine. You let them know what you're interested in, and then they can help guide your career. Or even just when it comes to something simple as a promotion, they know how to advocate for you because they're aware of what you're doing. And so, kind of developing a relationship with your manager early on, as early as you can, is a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say I completely agree. And I actually had sort of a revelation in terms of that. About a year into my job, I actually explained to my manager what I like to do. And he had a completely different realization because he thought that I liked one aspect of my job, whereas that was maybe my less favorite part of the job. And so it actually allowed me to get more work that I enjoyed doing just by communicating with my manager more effectively.
Absolutely. You both mentioned visibility and asking questions because like Rachel, you just said, if we don't know, if I'm working with you both, or you're working with other people don't know what you like or what your preferences are unless you voice them. And so it's very important to voice those early on so that you're actually having those people look out on your behalf. So those are really interesting points that you brought up. Then another thing that you mentioned, that you both mentioned, was don't be afraid to speak first and be that person that reaches out to a manager, another colleague, another leader in your community within your workspace, because sometimes we are shy, and we engineers, or at least I can speak on my behalf, I think I'm a little bit of an introvert, and so it makes it hard for me to like take that first step. But we really need to really take that first step and be our own self advocates. What are your thoughts about that?
I fully agree. I definitely it can be scary and daunting for sure. But as much as it seems like your manager, for example, should be the person checking in with you, a lot of times that's not the case. It's, you have to initiate. And so kind of, if you just force yourself to do it, it gets easier every time. And once you develop the relationship with the manager, hopefully over time, it gets much easier where you're, even communicating more fluidly than you were in the first place. So absolutely agree.
Yeah, and it sometimes helps to put together some sort of a checklist of things that you want to cover in a conversation prior to starting it. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but anything that you want to bring up that you want to make sure that you discuss, it's helpful just to write it down so that you end up talking about it.
Absolutely. I love all the input that you both have checklists and voicing your needs, and also where you see yourself, because managers have other people that they're responsible for, so you have to really speak up. And so that brings me kind of like another curiosity that I have. Network often gets emphasized in professional development conversations. And how have you leveraged your network, and how has it shaped your career so far?
I personally used to hate the word networking. I really dislike the feeling of owing somebody something. I always kind of associated networking with that. And as I've grown in my career, I could not have been more wrong about the tool of networking. Anytime I've like cold applied to a job and not done any networking, I've usually been really unhappy with the position. And so networking is as self-serving as it is for serving the other team as well. So, it allows you the opportunity to feel out a situation before you get into it. Even if networking is just, someone once told me that networking is like collecting data. And so you're collecting everybody's experiences and you're kind of associating yourself and seeing if you could do the same. So networking is huge. It should be huge, especially for me individually. It's helped me land the positions I'm most happy with, because I got to feel out whether or not I'd be a good fit for a team and whether or not the team would be a good fit for me. And so it kind of goes in both directions, and it's super critical if you want to feel fulfilled and make sure that something is the right thing for you.
I definitely agree that networking is important, but one of the things that I was, I guess, worried about at the beginning of my career was having it be mutually beneficial. I thought that being a mentee meant that I was just asking my mentor for help and guidance and they weren't really getting anything out of it. But I realized that it is actually impactful for both parties because you are learning from both of each other. And I love the way that Theresa talked about collecting data and shared experiences, because just because someone is more experienced in their career doesn't necessarily mean that they can't learn from their mentee as well. And networking can help not only getting new jobs or experiences, but also just having a sounding board when you're dealing with a situation where you're stuck maybe and you don't know what to do next and you don't really know what all of the options are. It's helpful to talk to somebody else and they may say, oh, actually, have you considered this? And then you have more options laid out in front of you that you can actually take into consideration.
Absolutely. I love all of that feedback, but I'm a little bit curious, Teresa. You said networking, you thought it used to be or something that you owed somebody. I'm just curious, what led you to think that way?
I think networking always for me was, my perception of it was that you network with somebody to try to get a job. And that I think is the wrong way to look at it now, because when you think of it that way, it can feel like someone's doing you a favor by getting you a job, but that's not necessarily all that it is. It can be that sometimes, but it doesn't have to be that every time. And in fact, I think it's better that maybe most of the networking that you do isn't always directly involved with a new position. Like Rachel said, it can be talking to somebody new and having them as a sounding board. Rachel does that for me all the time. But it's always good to make sure you're getting different perspectives. And that's what networking can be. It's career friendships in a different way to say it.
Just getting different perspectives opens up a whole new world of opportunities or people that you can meet, like-minded individuals that then you can, grow your network and share your ideas, share your thoughts, and to collectively, get to a better place and work through the vision that we have for, say, a particular program. And I also love the way that you said that it's collecting data, because you also have to be aware of your surroundings, so to speak, and the people that you are aspiring to go work with or for. Network allows you to collect that data, say, talk to other people that are in that environment. How did they get there? How do they like it? And so on. So I think that is really good input as well. And we've been talking about networking so far, but which naturally makes me think of mentoring and mentoringship. So let's get, and you both have said mentorships already, but let's get a little bit deeper. How important do you think that mentorship has been in your career so far? And I think you both are in about 5 years after graduating from college, right?
That's right.
Okay. So how do you see the mentorship that you have gained so far, or have have experiences with? How have you leveraged that mentorships in your career so far?
So I've had a couple of different mentorship situations. One was more formal. It's called the Mentoring the Professionals program at Northrop Grumman, and I applied to be a mentee and got paired up with a mentor. And this program lasted about a year, and we had regular tag ups, and we had specific goals that I would set up with, and we'd analyze my progress as I was going through and meeting those goals. And I really enjoyed the program, and I'm still connected to my mentor today, and we still meet up on a fairly regular basis. But there's also informal ways that you can set up mentoring situations. You don't necessarily need a program to guide you to do this. You can reach out to people yourself and make it whatever you want it to be. For example, there was a period of time where I was really interested in program management and what they do and what the job is like. So I told my manager at the time that I was interested in doing some kind of a shadowing situation or a mentorship with a program manager. And we communicated with the program manager on one of the programs that I was working. And he let me attend some of the weekly meetings that he would have with his manager and the other program managers, and just kind of let me into the day in the life of a program manager and what he did on a regular basis. So it was very insightful, and I learned the things that I didn't like, but also the things that I did like about that kind of a job. So it was useful.
Um, only ever had informal mentors, but I have a lot. And it's been super helpful for me because they can offer career advice, on a large scale, or it could be day to day, advice or help with your technical job or whatever you're doing on a smaller scale. And so I think mentorship has helped me a ton. It's the thing that exposed me to higher education. I'm pursuing my master's degree because of a mentor that kind of guided me in that direction. But it's also given me really good career advice. I had a mentor once tell me that, in when you're asking people for help and you need an opinion about something, he told me ask three people. And then once you get three people's opinions, then you can kind of come to your own conclusion. That's something that I've been able to do in my career since he said that. So it's been really helpful to just kind of have people around to, like we said before, sounding board, provide advice and guidance. Because most of the time, mentors don't have to be older than you, but most of the time they know a little bit more and they're further along and can kind of provide guidance for somebody that's a lot newer.
And it's really about finding your tribe, right? Your that executive board of people that are going to kind of guide you along because they have been there. Maybe they have a little bit more experience, maybe not. They don't have to be, people that have been in the industry for a long time, but people that have maybe walked in that path that you are aspiring to walk down that path. And so that's I love that. And I'm glad that you guys have found many paths to mentorships that are helping you throughout your career. And they will be so valuable as you progress in your career. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and working on different types of teams. And Theresa, you mentioned this. That was a challenge when you first came into the industry. But working with different types of teams and colleagues often requires strong communication and collaboration skills. So, what have you learned about navigating those team dynamics?
I think for someone who's early career, something that's really important is to remain humble and kind of keep an open mind. I think it's really easy to go into a situation a little headstrong, thinking that you know what the correct answer is, but it's important to be a good listener. I think that's often the piece of communicating that people forget is listening is also a big part of communicating and being a good communicator. I think that one thing that helped me, especially along those diverse barriers that I was talking about earlier, was to make sure people felt heard and felt like that their opinions were acknowledged. And it kind of helped open up a conversation rather than just being somebody dictating something's going to go one way. So I think that's been really critical for me, opening up my ears and being a good listener. That's not to say your opinion doesn't matter and that you shouldn't also express it, but maybe having that openness can help foster a greater kind of community among everybody where everyone is freer to kind of express their own opinion.
I agree that listening is incredibly important. I also think asking questions is really important too, to make sure that you actually know what someone is being asked of you, or just trying to understand generally what the situation is. I think it's easy to assume when you're with a team how people are feeling or what they're thinking, but it's always easier just to ask just in case.
Absolutely. Love all the feedback. You've said humble, open-minded, good listeners, and have a conversation because it's not anyone dictating this is the way it's going to be. It's a conversation and that collaboration that really makes those products that we're developing better products. So we really need that collaboration and asking questions because we need to ask questions. Otherwise, we may not be clear on what we need to do, or maybe people are not clear on what we mean or what we have said. So I love all of the great feedback that you both have. And I know that you are off to a great career in the future, now and in the future. So I can't wait to see all the exciting things that you do. But looking back on a little bit, we all have things we wish we hadn't stressed about much about, right, when we were in college. And what advice would you give your 20-year-old self about what's not worth worrying over?
I get very fixated on what people think of me. And I think that that kind of has been something that's been a point of frustration in my career. If you get too hung up on what people think of you, I think it's easy to kind of lose sight of yourself and your own well-being. I think many of us have been in a situation in our industries where the workload can get heavy, and if you're not kind of looking out for yourself and you're overly concerned with how you appear to others, it can be challenging to have a good boundary with work. So I think that getting hung up on other people's perception is good to a fault. You should care that you're making a good impression, but don't care too much to the point where you're sacrificing, things that actually matter, like your well-being.
I think that in general, one of the main things that I've learned is that it's better to over communicate than under communicate. When people are asking you questions about a status of something, or maybe you're in a tricky situation and you need to explain something, what the situation is, like technically speaking, it's better to just say more than is needed, because then it avoids more questions later. And then also going back to what Theresa said about sort of balancing priorities like work-life balance and making sure that you don't take too much on your plate. Um, it's also important to communicate with your manager what your current bandwidth is. I know that in engineering, I think that our jobs fluctuate a lot in terms of how busy we are. And it's important to let your manager know that, because they don't always fixate on what everybody is working on. And you sometimes have to tell them what your workload is as it's getting too much or slowing down, so that they can help you kind of figure out what to prioritize, and help you figure out if you can give some of your tasks to other people and just generally have a better balance.
I really love that you said, don't worry about what other people may think or say. Stay true to yourself. Let the naysayer say, no, you can't, you won't. But if you stay true to yourself and focus on, your path, and really surround yourself with those people that are going to see you through, I mean, the sky is the limit. So I love all these wise words. Great insights from both of you. So now for someone just starting in your field, what is one piece of advice that you would give them as we close out our conversation?
I just want to work off what Rachel just said, because I think being vocal is a huge deal. I think I sometimes follow the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. um, that is so critical, especially in engineering, when you're working with complex designs and you're having to work with all kinds of people, meaning people that work in, we're mechanical engineers, but I work often with electrical engineers, computer engineers, radio frequency engineers, you name it. There's all kinds of boundaries that we're crossing. So the more vocal you are, the more exposure you get to those different groups of people, you become almost like a point person, somebody that's aware of what's going on and you know how to ask the right questions, which is another huge thing. Just ask questions. Don't be afraid. Again, no, don't think about what other people think of you. You don't have to be worried about, oh, well, they think this is a stupid question. I hear all the time, there are no stupid questions. Just ask. And so I think in this industry specifically, it's really great to be vocal. And as engineers, we tend to not be, but it is one of those really important features to having a good career.
I definitely agree with asking lots of questions. I will say at the start of my career, everything sounded so daunting. The things that I was learning at work were so different than what I was learning at school. It felt like I was taking like a brand new class or something. And when you ask questions, make sure to actually write down notes and answers and stay organized so that you can go back and refer to your notes later and try to build understanding on what you're actually doing. That's one thing that I made the mistake of sometimes, where I'd be in a meeting and I would maybe potentially be lost. People were talking about things I didn't fully understand. And if you don't ask questions, you're not going to learn and you're going to stay in that situation. So make sure to ask questions, take notes, stay organized, and that should really help.
Excellent and amazing. I know both of your futures are bright, and I can't wait to see all the great things that you do. So ladies, thank you so much for sharing your journey so far with the Keys to the Future community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Don't forget to follow Keys to the Future on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more inspiring stories and industry insights. Until then, keep innovating and stay curious.